Good morning, everyone. I want to thank everybody for coming out to Showing Up Matters. Y'all can hear me? So today we're going to have a couple of young adults recite poems and stuff. But to kick off everything, I want to start off with mine. My poem is called I Walk Alone. I walk alone in the dark streets trying to find myself. Is this really me, or am I trying to front? Can I find myself in who I really am, or do I have to fight to get out these bundles of knots? Don't ask me what's wrong, because I make it matter. Can you put me from what's hurting and make my life much happier? I'm sorry for the way I act, but it's for many reasons. I'm hurt and bitter, and I change it like the seasons. I might come cold, I might come nice, but my heart has a block on it, and it's a cold block of black ice. Thank you.
Can I get another round of applause for our young poet, please? Well, to be honest, it's a little difficult, right, to follow the voice of our youth. It really is. And I'm sorry to be emotional right now. But these young people are why we're all here today. And I think that we know that, but I also think that a lot of times when those of us who have responsibilities and tasks and things to accomplish, I think that while we know that, we forget. And so as the Youth Policy Board came together to plan this event, we did not at any point in the day want to allow any of us to forget that the reason that we are here is because of our children and our young people. And so when you look in your program agenda, you will see that throughout the day, our young people are prominently featured. And their voices are here to remind us, to hold us accountable, and to keep us honest. And so as you listen to the young people when they come to the mic to recite their poetry, and as you read their poetry, I want you to see this as more than performance, right? A lot of times when we get our youth in the room, it's about performance. But what they are sharing with us is data, right? We talk about data all the time. We talk about statistics and numbers that show us how big a problem is. But the voices of these young people tell us what the problem is. And so I ask you to listen to them and to hear them and to take account of everything that they are saying throughout the day. So I thank all of you for showing up today, right? It matters that we all show up for our young people. The title of this conference is not about young people showing up at school. It's about us showing up for our young people to do the things that we need to do and to generate the ideas that we need to generate to change the conditions in which our young people every day are challenged to get up and go to school. I am Dr. Lauren Wells. I'm the co-chair of the Youth Policy Board, along with Dr. Robert Johnson, who is the dean of the medical school at Rutgers. And I was appointed as the co-chair by Mayor Baraka in 2014. In December of last year, the mayor charged the Youth Policy Board with bringing the city together to have a diverse, deep conversation about how we address this reality. That's why when you look around the room, if you're a policy person, it may look a little different than rooms that you're used to being in, right? We were very intentional about making sure that we brought in folks who are out on the ground every day working directly with young people to get them reattached to school. We worked very hard to make sure that we have the district, that we have our organizational partners, that we have the city represented in this conversation. And so we're here to talk about chronic absenteeism. And what does that mean, right? It means 10% of school annually. And while that may not sound like a huge number, right, 2 days a month for the entire year doesn't sound like a big deal, but it has an impact, right? It has an impact on learning, it has an impact on relationships with school, it has an impact on schools' relationships with families, and you could go on and on and on. And you may have seen or read some of the ACNJ's reports about chronic absenteeism. In 2016, they let us know that statewide, from kindergarten to 12th grade, about 136 students in 216 districts were chronically absent from school during the 2014-15 school year. Absenteeism rates are highest in preschool and high school. In preschool, the issues are very different than the issues for high school students. The chronic absenteeism report on Newark showed that 4,328 students in Newark, kindergarten through grade 3, were chronically absent during the 2013-14 school year. So what does this mean for high school students? In 2016, 2017, about 4,600 Newark high schoolers, 44%, were chronically absent from school. That's a total of 80,000 days of school. The reasons why high school students are absent chronically from school include things like disengagement with school and the curriculum, a lack of trusted relationships with adults in school, social, emotional, and health issues, depression, anxiety, and exposure to trauma, personal safety, family responsibilities, and parental support for school. So we're here today to talk about and strategize about how to change this incredibly pressing and harsh reality facing education in our city. The fact that on a daily basis, too many children are missing school repeatedly, chronically. We're here to ask ourselves why. All of us to ask ourselves why, right? We all have a piece in this puzzle, whether you work in a school, whether you work in a neighborhood organization, whether you work for a city agency. The question of why lives with all of us. We're here to hear directly from students the factors that have contributed to their attendance and engagement with school, and to think collectively together what strategies and policies can help the city and all of us work together to change this reality so all of our children, not just some, not just those who come to school knowing their alphabet, not just those who come to school speaking English, not just those who have parents who are not incarcerated, not just those who have never been involved with juvenile justice, all of our children are set on a course for meaningful, fulfilling, productive, empowered, and dare I say, happy lives. We're starting this conversation today with a focus on high school because, quite frankly, we have no more time to lose with our high school students. But we also recognize the importance of a continued conversation that addresses this reality in the early years. So we have a packed agenda. They're in your folders. You will hear from our young people. You will hear from Newark Public Schools about the current status of chronic absenteeism in the district and efforts that are currently underway to address the problem. You will hear from a panel of individuals working in schools and outside of schools to put in place policy strategies and programs to get young people and their families more attached to school. You will break out into wards to have ward conversations that think about what are the resources that we have in each ward, What are the collaborations that have existed? And what strategies would you recommend to put in place in order to address this problem? So I asked some folks who were part of the planning process to send me a few bullet points that I needed to highlight for you all. And so here are some of the thoughts from those individuals. Chronic absenteeism matters because every day a student is not in school for any reason is a day of learning lost. Whether a student is out sick or missed a bus or slept in, the hours of education lost are the same. Schools cannot solve this problem alone. It's not a school problem, it's our problem. Because so many issues that cause absences occur outside of schools. An essential component to improving attendance is listening to students and families about what factors affect attendance and what students need. Feedback from this summit will be used to help shape policy for the mayor in Newark around chronic absenteeism. And it is important that we have a holistic approach that includes community and community resources and addressing chronic absenteeism in Newark. So I would like to thank a number of partners in the Youth Policy Board. The Youth Policy Board is a cross-sector collaborative table that involves many agencies at the city, county, and state level. And in terms of planning this event, I would like to thank Newark Youth Opportunity Network, ACNJ, Newark Thrives, My Brother's Keeper, Newark Public Schools, the Office of the Mayor, Schools That Can, Rutgers University, and Independence, a family of services, for their dedicated and tireless commitment to pulling off an event in 4.5 months, 3.5 months. And I'd also like to thank the Nicholson Foundation, the Victoria Foundation, and the Opportunity Youth Network for their generous financial support for the event. Last, I'd like to thank Janet Mendez. I don't know where she is, but none of this would be happening without her tireless and unyielding response and patience to every request that was made by the Youth Policy Board. So we have 3 MCs today. We split the time up. We will start our day with William Simpson from My Brother's Keeper. Margarita Muniz will follow from Newark Public Schools, and then Ken Carmichael from Rutgers University will close us out. So I now pass the mic to my good friend, Will.
Good morning. Before we get started, I just want to give another round of applause to the young person that brought that first poem. So if you could just stand up. Stand up. I thought it was powerful. Like, I walk alone, right? So none of our young people should be walking alone. And when you look around the room today, there's a lot of caring adults that run programs, agencies, organizations that every day let people, young people, know that they don't walk alone. So thank you for being here today. So Lauren actually took all the hard work out of it. I don't need the table set, let you guys know while we're here. We can kind of just dive right into the program, right? So as you see today, we've got poems all over the room. And I urge you, like throughout the day, before we go to breakouts, during lunch, take a moment and just read some of these poems. I think Lauren was a little emotional earlier just because she just finished walking around the room and actually listening, reading some of the poems. It really kind of is reflective of what our young people are thinking, right? So when we start talking about what policies we should form, what we should be doing as leaders within the community, it should only be informed by the young people that we hear from. So please, take a minute, read the poems that are around. But throughout the day, we actually have some young people from the OIN network sprinkled throughout the program that'll be bringing us some of their poetry. So kind of start us off this morning, we've got Natasha Obermuller from Lead Charter School. Where's she at? All right, here we go. You come on up. Yeah, absolutely. We got to hear you in the back. And Natasha will be reciting The Beauty in Me. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Natisha, but it's okay. Natisha Obermuller, that's my name. My poem is entitled The Beauty in Me. I love your unique smile, the shapes of your lips reminisce within. Your beauty shines through the sadness and the love that overpowers your hate. Some may forget that we are kings and queens, so they lurk where we cannot see, to stop us from where we have to reach. But instead of giving up and giving in, we walk with our pride held high. Your born sorrow does not determine your fate. Your natural self will lead your way. Forget, but never forget the hate, for it will guide you in your mistakes. Thank you.
We should walk with our pride held high, right? We should all be doing that every single day. Next, we do have one edit. You'll see in the program that we had Aaliyah Black. Aaliyah wasn't able to join us today, so instead we are honored with the presence of Quadia Watson.
How y'all doing? My name is Quadia, and my poem is called Shackles. So I said, the invisible shackles around my wrists become more visible through the life I live. The streets around me reek with death. Another man killed. Somebody's brother, son, or lover. Nobody cares though, we just continue to kill each other. When will the day come when we can love one another? Serving your homie's mother for a quick come up. Screaming Black Lives Matter, but with our black lives we do dumb stuff. The hood is like the wild, us minorities, the sitting ducks. The government is the predators, they don't give a fuck. Education destroys our brain, but make us well trained.
So one more round of applause for our two young people. You know, it takes a lot to get up on stage and say some poems in front of folks that you don't know at 10:20 in the morning. So we appreciate both of you and thank you. All right, so next we actually have Dr. Sunrise Smith from Newark Public Schools, the Executive Director of Student Support Services. She's gonna give us a current look at what's going on around chronic absenteeism within Newark Public Schools, with a specific eye around data around chronic absenteeism and the efforts underway by the district to increase student attendance.
Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. So I am clearly not Dr. Sunrise Smith. She is to my right, but we thought that the importance of today's topic deserved a tag team this morning. So my name is Brad Haggerty, and I serve as Chief Academic Officer at Newark Public Schools, along working side by side with Dr. Sunrise Smith. So we're going to talk this morning a little bit about what's happening within NPS and sort of how NPS is strategizing to address this chronic absenteeism challenge. And I want to start by just saying, first of all, this is at its core an existential kind of crisis. We are offering something and students aren't coming. That's a school-based problem, that's a societal problem. So the framing that Dr. Wells gave for the morning is right on target, right? We share this challenge together, but if students aren't coming, that is our most basic problem. On the first slide, I know you guys have that in your packets as well. I'll draw your attention to that. You'll notice the arrow going up in the middle. We're very proud at NPS about our graduation rates going up, PARCC scores going up, etc. But the bottom line is how much more steep that line could be going up if more students were attending school regularly. So this is, again, at the core of our work as a school district. As we get started today, I wanted to ask very quickly, by a show of hands, how many in the audience attended the AC&J conference last fall? Okay, I just want to make sure we weren't repeating things for folks who were at that event. So we're going to talk about a little bit of data for 2 minutes. This is the problem. 48% of our high school age students are not attending school regularly. They are what is defined as chronically absent. As a district, if you include all grades from pre-K to 12, that number is about 30%. Today, our focus is specifically on our older students, on our high school students in particular. I want you to know that this problem is endemic to many communities. If you look at some of the colleague and peer cities around the around the state, you'll see that our city ranks in the middle of the pack in terms of the deepness and pervasiveness of this problem. 43% of our high school students categorized as chronically absent. So that clearly is unacceptable. It's a challenge that we must collectively face, and we must move that needle in a different direction. So let's talk a little bit about kind of what we know. We spent a lot of time over the last year, almost 2 years, making sure that we understand the problem. And so the first most important thing is data and knowing who is not in school, and making sure that we are accurately tracking that information every single day, and that we feel confident that the data we put in front of ourselves, school leaders, community partners, etc., is accurate. And so I know this sounds like a low bar, but the first action step was, are we taking attendance every day in every school to have an accurate count of who is here and who is not here? And we can say with confidence after work on this last year that the answer to that question is yes. That we know for sure and we feel confident in whatever data we put in front of anyone, a school leader, a parent, a district, a community, that that data is accurate. Secondly, now that we know that the data is accurate, now what are some of the trends we start to see? One of the biggest trends we see is there is a major drop-off that occurs between 8th and 9th grade. Literally, the same students who were not chronically absent as 8th graders become chronically absent as 9th graders. It gets worse as 10th graders, worse as 11th graders, and by the time we're 12th graders, over 50% of our students are hitting that chronically absent marker. So something is happening in the transition, and it kind of continues to worsen over the course of the high school years. We want to look into that in more depth, like what kind of, let's unpack that a little bit. And one of the things we found is that not simple, but structural things like the school calendar matter. When high school finals are over the first week of June, and school continues for 2.5, 3 more weeks, you see a lot of students not coming to school those last 2.5 or 3 weeks. And if I were to look at the high school students in the audience and get nodding heads, I'm sure they would attest to the accuracy of that. So we had to change the school calendar. One thing we did this year is we pushed our finals a little later, ended our school year a little earlier to try to cut down just on those days at the end of the year that would contribute to students' chronic absenteeism. There are other things we could do, right? Days where there are historically low attendance. Days before vacations are a good example, early dismissal days. And one of the things that our schools are doing really, really well and kind of really leaning into is not to give up on those days, but make those special days. Make those days where accolades are given out and special events happen and there are recognitions and the like, to basically encourage and incentivize attendance even on those lowest historically attending days. So we start with data, right? We got to know what we're doing and kind of respond to that data. What the data will tell us, what conversations will tell us, what, as Lauren said, what listening to students will tell us, is that there are a relatively small handful of reasons why high school students don't come to school. And they're kind of broken up on this piece here in two big categories. Some things that are absolutely squarely within the school's control, and some things that require collaboration and partnership with others. So I won't go down each of those just because Dr. Wells already articulated those, and we'll be talking about those a lot during the course of the day. But my guess, actually I know it's true because I walked around the room as well and read some of the poems, is that within the lines of those poems, either explicitly or implicitly stated, are a lot of these reasons. A lot of these reasons, whether it is not feeling that they're in an environment of physical or psychological safety, not feeling connected to peers or to the adults in the school, bearing the weight of life that are responsibilities outside of their responsibilities as a student, getting to school, whether that is a transportation challenge or a safety challenge based on their route to school and the dangers inherent in that walk. So these are the challenges we need to solve, and I would argue that this becomes the focus of what we talk about today and the rest of what we share and talk out today. So let me turn the microphone over to Dr. Smith to tell you a little bit about what NPS has been doing the last couple of years, and we'll go from there.
So given all of the information that Brad shared up front and how Dr. Wells started in the beginning, this is a responsibility for us, everyone in the room. And so when I started this position a few years ago, I realized that this was not something that I could just look at just from the perspective of attendance. I had to take a holistic approach. Because the reality is attendance is a symptom, right? So we can put all of our ideas or suggestions on how we fix attendance or get students to come to school, but if we don't address the underlying issues, if we don't address the reasons why they don't want to come to school, then all we're doing is constantly throwing ideas up against the wall and never getting any results. So when you think of the work that has taken place, one of the things that we looked at, so I'm going to skip over 2016-17 because Brad really started talking about how we focused on looking at the data. But one of the things we also did in 2016-17 was we looked at the people who was responsible for data in the schools and for those systems. And we started to pour into them. We started to build them up, provide more training, additional support, understanding that people needed additional information to be able to feel confident that they could do their work. And so with that, training, support, additional assessments for the attendance teams, advisory outcomes, right? So what are those structures that are in place that connect students to one another, connect them to a caring adult? So if anything you take away from this day, remember attendance is a symptom. So no matter how many things you hear today, you want to ask yourself, is the solution getting to the root, right? So it's no different in discipline. Right? So we look at discipline and how students behave, and then we say, oh, that student's behaving inappropriately. Whereas underneath the inappropriate behavior is a form of communication. So what we did then in 2017-18 was we expanded. Once we had the basis of supporting those individuals in the building, giving them confidence, we then said, well, how do we continue to expand best practices, but now include this idea of trauma-informed care? Right? Because we know that a lot of students who are traveling to school, some of the issues that would stop them from coming to school is fear. And then if they continue to travel to school and they get there, what happens in the brain is then triggered, and it could take hours for a student to actually be prepared to listen and do work. So their physical body may even be there, but they may not even be attending. Right? So once again, coming back to the fact that attendance issues are a symptom. So we continued into this year with Tier 1 supports, Tier 2 supports, and Tier 3. So when we think of Tier 1 supports, we were thinking, what are we doing in the entire building? What are we doing for all students? What are the kind of supports that we're looking at for culture and climate? Right? So once again, it may sound like, oh, well, Dr. Smith, what did you do about attendance? We have to look at some of the underlying issues. So if students don't want to come to school, how do we create an environment where students do want to come to school? How do we make it enjoyable? How do we give students a voice to say, this is the type of environment that I want? So we looked at a few partners that came in and provided a lot of culture and climate support, assessments. We also looked at restorative practices, right? So how are we addressing the needs of students when things arise in school and they don't feel safe? What is the communication? What is the mode? Are we just constantly suspending students? Because once we suspend, that also contributes what? To the attendance issue. And then we're looking currently at de-escalation training. So we're looking at least 5 adults in every single building who are being trained on how do you address when a student escalates, right? Because listen, in the work that I do, the honesty is that sometimes adults are triggering students, right? So sometimes it's us as the adults. We think we're doing the best that we can, but in essence, we're actually tipping them over the edge further in situations where we don't have to go to the extreme. So by the end of this year, there'll be 5 trained adults in every single building in the district that would have had de-escalation training to be able to support students. When we think of trauma-informed care, we looked at Child Mind Institute as just one. There are many mental health supports, but when we think of district-wide, they came in to provide trauma-informed care to our guidance counselors and also to our social workers to increase their capacity to be able to do this work. And next year, we'll expand with their work, which I'll touch on in a little bit. And then we looked at Concentric, and Concentric has been supporting us around training our SST teams on how do you look at home visits and take that information and utilize that data to make decisions. Because you can go to a parent's home and visit, but what are you doing with the information after you go to their home? Are you actually, once again, looking at the root of what are the issues with attendance, or is it just all on the surface? So here were some of the promising results. Data, as Brad mentioned, it looks great because we spent all of last year addressing our systems, making sure that what we have in place is systemic in the whole entire district. Clear roles and responsibilities. So right now there's a team in every single district, an SST team, which we call, they're like our school culture and climate team, where their focus is not necessarily on attendance of one student, but they're looking at attendance in the entire building. And not just the numbers, they then ask the questions, what are we doing as a school in the other areas that would support students and encourage them to come to school? And then we also have what we call the INRS team. So our students that are struggling or having difficulty, we've increased the support to those individuals, expanded training to provide a way for people to be wiser, that we're not just pointing fingers, we're not just looking and saying, well, you're the problem. We're asking ourselves the critical question, what can we do differently as the adults in the building? And we did massive training. Some of our persistent challenges that are still present is the fact that it's not one size fits all. And it'll never ever be one size fits all. So what works maybe for a school in the North Ward may not necessarily work for a school in the South Ward or the East Ward. So being very mindful that we have to respect every community and the type of interventions that are put in place in each individual school. We also know that we need more Tier 2 supports. So I tell people, I know you know my email address. If you don't, come and let me know what it is. I'm always looking for organizations to come and partner with us. I'm looking for fraternities, sororities, mentoring organizations, because I'd like to expand our Tier 2 supports that students who really need it, like the Great Work Success Mentors are doing. How do we provide those students with that kind of care and support? And the other piece that is a challenge is how do we support families as students get older? Because it changes the dynamics for our high school students in that area. What we're going to do is touch on some of the work that's been done in the South Ward schools.
So the South Ward Community School Initiative was launched in December of 2015, and it, in 2 short years, is starting to generate really promising results around what we can do as a community in support of a school in order to advance and kind of knock down some of these barriers to students' readiness to learn. For those who don't know, the South Ward Community Schools encompass 5 schools, 4 elementary schools, and 1 high school. And at the base of that work are kind of 6 core program elements that the team and its kind of genesis agreed upon. And those are listed up there. Concepts such as connection to a caring adult, high quality instructional leadership, social emotional learning, etc. One of the things we can say early on is that these 5 schools sort of are on the vanguard of what we hope and want to accomplish across the city as a whole. They are that model where, whether you term them wraparound services, holistic services, unified coherent supports, but basically all the things that need to be true for a student to be ready to learn. And what we're seeing here in the 5 schools already is we're starting to see results. We're starting to see things change. We're starting to see things like improved attendance, improved academic outcomes, absolutely increased capacity of staff. So a couple examples here are within the South Ward Community Schools, they're piloting with an organization called Success Mentors, which is basically a team of individuals that will basically take ownership of the attendance for a small group of students. Typically 12 to 15 students who are in that chronically absent category, and they will say, I'm going to get to know those students, get to know those families, get to know those reasons for those absences, and stop at nothing until we help solve those. And we're starting to see results. I see Mr. Allen in the back of the room from Brick Avon. Brick Avon being one where we saw Brick Avon was near the top of their network in attendance this fall, and I believe as a result of some of the work they are as part of the Community School Initiative. Similarly, climate culture work around programs. We have a program called Positive Action that is school-wide, where the intention is how do we, as adults and then with the students that we serve, create positive learning environments that are filled with excitement and optimism and belief and hope of what can be, and make them our school communities the places where families want their children and where students, as they get older, want to be. Some promising early results. Again, I think one of the major things we want to point out about the community schools is a couple of things. Number one is, first, They have effectively created structures, established trusting relationships so that we are able to hear what students and families are saying. So to Lauren's initial point, we are listening, we are hearing, and once we hear what the challenges are, we're able to then address them. So the availability of programs and services right there at the school or directly connected in the community, there's no gap between saying, here's what we've got to solve for, and then being able to solve for it. Secondly, another thing that I would mention, again, I mentioned earlier, is this concept of connections to an adult through the Success Mentor program. That is one model that we're looking to expand in the coming year and years, because it, again, taps into the core importance of that relationship and that relationship helping drive student attendance. Lastly, I'd want to sort of shout out there's a lot of collaborative work around the city in support of the community schools, specifically the Mayor's Children's Cabinet, which is a kind of collective impact organization. There are probably many of you in the room who sit on that cabinet in various ways. So this is a collaborative effort to how do we figure out what those challenges are and then jointly solve them. A couple of examples on the kind of security side, our successful collaboration with Newark Police Department to ensure safe passages for our students from their homes to school, as well as a program called Newark Cares, in which the Newark Police Department shares with schools when they are aware of a traumatic event that has happened in a student's home the night before, and they let the school know this is what occurred so they can be fully prepared to support that student and that family. So just a couple examples of the positive partnerships coming out of the Children's Cabinet. Again, so I think when we look at the Southport Community Schools, it's great to see a number of those schools represented here today. I think they are, in effect, are on the forefront of our learning in this area and our work to systematize a lot of what they're starting to get right.
So some of the things that we want to kind of wrap up is this idea that moving forward, how the approach for the district is like a team. So it's this idea that we, collectively in this room, are responsible for our young people. And we are responsible to make sure that either we're the caring adults that they're connected to, or we are connecting them to other caring adults. So with the success of our Success Mentors, we'll be looking to do more work with them next year. And also really being able to duplicate and understand the nuances of relationships between adults and students in a building. And so if a team of 4 don't work well, then how would a team this size work well if we're not all on the same page? And so part of that is understanding that if you know of organizations that this is their work with connecting students to caring adults, let's start those conversations. The second thing, confirmation, what we already know is that consistent communication between all stakeholders is critical, right? So if I tell the staff in the building, if you're not talking to parents, don't come to me and tell me what's not working already, because you have to be able to communicate with the people that know their children the best. And so part of that is ensuring that everyone in the conversation is respected. So everyone who sits at the table with regards to supporting students has to be respected, and that information has to be shared, collaboration has to be there, and a strategic plan. So if you come together around a student as a parent or as a community involver, what are our end goals and how are we seeking to achieve that? And ultimately, looking ahead, my big excitement is around social emotional learning. And this idea that our students in this day and age have so much at their fingertips. They have phones, they can get any piece of information that they want from a cell phone. But also sometimes what's lost in that is relationship. And so we can't disconnect from our students just because we think that they're in a generation that is always connected to their phones. So social emotional learning really taps into what are those skills that we want to teach our students that will help them to be successful, but also help us to be successful. Because we as adults can benefit from some SEL learning. Would everyone agree? Yes. Absolutely, right? Just look at some of the relationships you may have either on your job or in your family. So we can't look at our students and constantly say they need SEL learning, but we're unwilling to look at ourselves and say, what SEL can we do for ourselves? So with that, we're going to be expanding those Tier 1 supports. We're going to be expanding trauma-informed care. In many schools throughout the district, they'll be receiving what's called resilience groups, which is really an 8-week group where they'll learn skills on how to be resilient and what type of supports. And also staff will continue to get trained so that they can do this work themselves. Because ultimately, we want to increase the capacity of the adults in the building so that we're not constantly going outside to invite people in, but that we're investing in those who work in the district and building them up professionally. There'll be some additional roles that will be specifically focused on attendance. And that support will be, like I said before, no intervention is cookie cutter, so every ward needs something different. So what would that mean for a great mind around attendance that is specifically designated for a ward or for a network of schools around some of these issues, and really supporting our schools that are struggling the most. So I'm very excited around SEL and some of the new supports. My email address is S as in Sam, 16 Smith, S as in Sam, 16 Smith. I'm always open for ideas. I came to this work because I love young people. And I came to this work because I believe that when adults shut up and listen to kids and young people, we actually can get stuff done. And so I'm really about listening and being quiet and hearing what people have to offer, and then being the voice to carry it forward. So please, if you're looking to partner, I'm open. Please email me. And I think that's it for us. Oh, what's that? See? That's because I've been in the job so long. S16smith@nps.k12.nj.us. I see some people mouthing it. See that? He's like, at US. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
So, I think we heard a lot right there, right? A couple takeaways that I had, which I loved, right, is this kind of focus on trauma-informed approaches, and understanding that a lot of what we see in the school space comes from a trauma space. So if our solutions are going to be effective, they have to come from a trauma-informed approach. And also it's about communication. So it's not necessarily us just operating in a silo in our part of the city. It's about talking to people in the other side of the city, right? Learning best practices that we can employ with our young people that we work with. And then the success mentor piece, right? When I look around the room, I mean, y'all two are sitting right here, Sharif and Rameh, right? Y'all are success mentors, right? You actually go and find young people where they are to make sure that there's a level of accountability. I see so many faces around the room that are already doing this work. But if we're able to formalize the term and actually really start to put some meat behind it around the city, we'll see a lot of success and impact in making sure that we see lower levels of chronic absenteeism. So just to kind of move the program right along, we have two more poets. This is like the exciting part of the morning, right? We get to hear from more young people. So the first, we have Anaya Reddick. And forgive me if I said the name wrong, you can correct me when you come up. Anaya Reddick from Lee Charter School. Reddick, is that close? Jasmine. I gotta talk to Mark after this. We gotta get these names.
Hello, my name is Jasmine Anaya Reddick, and the name of my poem is called To Be Heard. So, to be heard, the tears that fall from my eyes is all the pain from my life. To be heard is a strong kind. I let my heart bled to death. I can't even catch my breath. The punch to my face, the time that I want to erase, the mark that just want to erase. My life is ruined with nothing but pain. All my thoughts and my memories down the drain. To be loved again, call me insane. To a father who never came, but we say life is a game. The things we say, to be heard every day, when will you realize that my life is nothing but shame? But all along, I was hurt, and you knew. So who was the one to blame? Shall I lay in this shallow dark, but let my profound words make sure it hurts?
So this is some of the awesome poetry that's around the room, coming from our young people, our amazing young people here in the city of Newark, in the OIN network, and specifically Lead there. Next, I'm excited, as I've already read this poem, to hear from this young man, David Williams from Uplift Academy. yours is by the door, brother, so everybody ready, so we're expecting a lot. No pressure.
No pressure.
My poem is called I Was Raised by the Trap. Where I was raised, you couldn't squeal. The way of life was to find your next meal. You couldn't maneuver if you weren't real, but at the end of the day, nobody cared how you feel. Yes, we were broken, but skilled. Broke, but willed. Mama at work, but my brothers were in the field, because it's give or you get, so it's kill or be killed. I was raised evil with ill mental health. Pounds in the ceiling, but promises to fulfill to ourselves. We didn't think that we could ask for help. Had a family, so being rich wasn't an option. We wanted the wealth. So Mama thought the crib was enough to keep us alive. Little did she know that we died in our own minds. When you're raised for survival, everything is fine. Not to say the things I saw didn't leave me traumatized. Mama didn't have her own way out. It had us all trapped. Thought the only way out for me was the trap. I went to the trap, trying to trap, and it was a trap. When you're born with the world on your shoulders, how could you navigate in that? It's not easy to know I wasn't like the rest, but the trap raised me. What's next?
So again, these are reflections of what our young people see every day and how they internalize what they see, and this is their poetry in real life. So next, I get the honor to introduce a great man who's done a lot of stuff in the city of Newark, from being a principal, councilman, now mayor, right? Doing a great job over the past 4 years. And I would say, I think a lot of what our young people are speaking to is this culture that they've grown up in that's presenting all the negativity around them. And if you notice, the title of this is Showing Up Matters, Shifting the Culture of Chronic Absenteeism. And I'm happy to say that we've all been a part of this kind of culture shift in the city of Newark over the past 4 years, whether it's criminal justice, public safety, health, education, the homelessness that we see in our community, and today, chronic absenteeism. And the reason we do that is through the leadership of Mayor Baraka. So without further ado, Mayor Baraka.
Thank you. So first, I just want to thank Dr. Wells for her work in putting this together. Dr. Johnson, of course, and Newark Public Schools, and all of the folks that sit on the Youth Policy Board, to make this event, program, conference, meeting, whatever we're going to call it, happen this morning. It is extremely important. One, because the most important thing is attendance. Research shows that kids that go to school, even if they go to a quote-unquote failing school, that their life outcomes are better than those who do not. Let me say that again. Kids that are in a school, whether we call it a failing school or not, or low performing, or whatever you want to call it, right? Their life outcomes are better than those kids who do not go to school at all. Which means that our job is to get them into a school building. That's what we're supposed to be trying to do. Get them into a school building, and get them into a school building frequently, which is why we're talking about attendance and why attendance matters. And I'm glad to hear trauma-informed care was brought up, because ultimately the reason that we're having difficulty getting kids in school is because of trauma. And then we have to expand our view of what trauma is. There's not just violent trauma, there's psychological trauma, there's all kind of other pieces of trauma that we kind of leave out. We always talk about trauma of fear of being beat up, or fights, or violence, or shooting. There's all kind of trauma. If police rush into your house at 1 o'clock in the morning and arrest your father while you're in bed, it's a traumatic experience. If you're standing on the corner and you're thrown up against the wall 5 times a week, thrown on the ground, somebody going in your pants, reaching in your pockets, that's trauma, right? Your mother and father arguing and fighting is a traumatic experience. There's a bunch of traumatic experiences that take place in our community because of the levels of poverty and all the other kind of issues that exist in our community. Creates trauma. Creates, our detachment from these kind of social norms, and there's traumatic experiences as a result of that. And so we're trying to respond to that trauma to get people to school, mainly, but more importantly, in my view, to get a community that's functioning. So collaboration is key. It's important that we collaborate. That means that we all talk, we all converse, we put our issues on the table. And collaboration means that we have to have trust. Trust that we tell you what's wrong. Because sometimes it's difficult for us to get to the answers because we're afraid to tell each other what's wrong. And we're not just talking about kids. I'm not talking about kids telling you what happened to them. I'm talking about adults who are afraid to show their shortcomings, or we didn't do this correctly, or this didn't happen right in school, or this didn't happen right at home, or our institution didn't get this right today. And having a discussion about that and having the confidence that the people you're sharing it with are not going to use that information to destroy, belittle, demean your organization, your institution, or your beliefs, or anything. The fact that you fell down, and that our collaboration is designed that we all get lifted up, right? And that's difficult for us to be able to do. This is one of the reasons why we can't address the problems that we have. I do want to say the smallest unit of the community is not the school. I want us to be aware of that. The smallest unit of our community is not our school. It is not the most important piece of our community. The most important piece of our community is our family. It's our family, the smallest unit, the organizing principle of our community should be the strengthening of our family. That's it. Not the school is a part of that and is a very important part of that, but the family is important. So if the family is not strong, it affects the school. Our job is to then make sure all of the policies that we put together strengthens our families, which in turn should logically strengthen our young people and give them an opportunity to go to a school that's a sanctuary. And if the school is not a sanctuary, then they can't go, they don't want to go, they're not interested in going, they don't want to be there. Most people don't want to go home because their home is not a sanctuary. They don't want to go to school because the school is not a sanctuary, and they find sanctuary on the corner. Right? Then you want to know why they more want to be on the corner as opposed to the school, because the school is not a sanctuary. And we haven't created a collaborative kind of model in the school that provides a sanctuary for young people to go there and be who they are with all of their flaws. In a space where they feel free to fall down because they're well-meaning adults that are going to lift them up and provide systems that capture them and assist them and becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. So, you know, the trauma-informed care is what we're doing citywide. It's not something that we're just doing in the school side. We need the schools to be on board. We need the schools to share the information, to tell the truth about what's going on. But we also need all of the institutions in the city to be driven by trauma-informed care. And that's what we're doing. So it is Attorney General policy, Attorney General guidelines, that if a police officer arrests a child over the weekend, or if something happens to a child, they have to report it to the school. But then what happens? Right? Then what happens? That's important. That's a discussion that we have on our side. What happens then? What is the obligation of the principal at that point? What is the obligation of the teachers at that point? What is the obligation of the guidance counselor at that point, right? So if we had a case of meningitis in your school, there is serious policies that we have to enact immediately that includes the health officer of the city, the hospitals, the police department, the state, the city, the schools. Everybody acts because there's policies in place. There is no policy when you see your brother get murdered on the street, or you get arrested the night before. There's no policy in place. Somebody calls the school, they do their due diligence, it ends there. The police rush into Garden Spires, arrest 50 adults. Where all of those kids, what is the protocol after that happens? In school, in the community, what's the protocol? There is none. Who even knows if, when they arrested the adults, if the kid has an adult in their household now? Who even goes to find out? Right, so that's what all of this is. That's what all of this is about, right? That's what all of this is about. And hopefully, I'm not like making you like too glum and gloom and all this stuff, but I'm trying to paint a picture of why we need to do this and why it's important for us to respond in a way that we're connected, and the schools can't do it, we can't do it, the social workers can't do it, we have to do it together. And that's really what this is about. We have to, and we're not talking about just one individual incident of trauma. We're talking about consistent trauma that takes place over periods of time, so much so that we can't call it post-traumatic stress, because post indicates that it is over or after the fact. It is stuff that has happened consistently. So maybe there's a new, I don't know, Dr. Johnson, a new definition for the kind of trauma our kids in our community go through, because post is not a good characterization of what's happening in our community. And so we put all our systems in place to respond to this. So I'm gonna really sit down this time. So our job is to strengthen the community, not weaken it. So the policies that the school board comes up with should not be designed to weaken the community. It should be designed to strengthen the community, right? And so when you take institutions from a community that automatically gives it stability and strength, right, then you're further traumatizing that community. You're re-traumatizing that community. If you make people take additional forms of transportation to school that they don't have to, right, you create trauma. You create or add to trauma, right? When you create situations where people lose the things that they counted on for generations to provide breakfast, lunch, care. When you get rid of those institutions, you add to trauma. It's important for us to understand that, right? So our job is not to re-traumatize or add to trauma, but to mitigate and eliminate trauma. That's what we're supposed to be doing. So the policies that we create, that's what trauma-informed care means. Any decision that you make, you have to take into consideration trauma. Any decision, any policy that you put into place, you have to take into consideration that you're dealing with trauma. And all of us, if you was born and raised or you live in cities like our city across America, you've been traumatized. And some of us have learned to deal with it, or we hide it, right? Or we act like we tough guys, and that's what we do. We the brick city, we tough. We so tough. Well, actually, we're having an insane kind of response to trauma, because the doctors slap children on the butt when they're born so they can respond to trauma, right? If the baby doesn't respond, then there's something wrong. So people who walk around the community like everything is okay is having an abnormal response to trauma. And if you don't realize that, and if you haven't done anything with that, then something's wrong, and sooner or later there's going to be an explosive response that you're not ready to deal with. And I know some of you teachers have dealt with some explosive responses around here. As a matter of fact, if you haven't dealt with it, for some police officers in here, they've dealt with some explosive responses to it on a few corners out here. So that's why this is important to me, why I'm here, why I took the time to come here this morning. I want to thank everybody for understanding the importance of this. And hopefully it's just not another talking point, another discussion for us, that we put systems and structures in place to begin with to deal with the effects of trauma on our young people, on our families. Because we're not just talking about young people, we're talking about their mamas too. And their fathers. I'm not going to say, and Nan, the lady from Ohio said, we a package deal. I don't know what's going on around here. They said, I come with my man, we a package deal. You're right. So about the mothers and their fathers, absolutely. And our families. So we have to put policies in place that deal with our children and their families and their relationship to the school at the same time. So I'm glad to be here. I'm sure you're going to have an incredible meeting, convening here today, and I know we're going to carry it on to the school year and the next school year after that and help us build, which I like they refer to, community kind of schools around the city. We need our community involved in our children's lives. So thank you.
Thank Thank you, Mayor, for once again driving home the need of community and families. Because as our mayor, an educator at heart, reminds us that when we do things without the collaborative spirit that is intentional and strategic about strengthening families, we are lacking. Because when we strengthen families, we strengthen a community, we strengthen a district, and we strengthen a city. Truly, the research has shown that when families are involved in the education of their children, 3 things happen. We get better behavior in the classroom, we get better attendance, and we get increased graduation rates. Every principal, every administrator wants those things. Every parent, every caregiver wants those things. And as I look across the room and I see so many of our parent advocates are champion for our children, I see Asia, I see Ms. Gregory, we have Ms. Holder, and so many of you who on a daily basis continue to commit to the children of Newark, whether they're your students or your grandbabies or just children that we love. Ms. Denise Cole in the house. So I want to thank all of the parents for being some champions, and I want to remind our young people, get your parents involved in school. We have PTO and PTA parents that are now elected officials. Their leadership starts in the classroom and branches out to our city. So thank you to all the parents for everything you do. Please, un aplauso. And continuing with the collaborative spirit we heard from our great mayor, now we bring to the podium the leader of the Newark Public School District, Robert Gregory, a native son of the city of Newark and a product of Newark Public Schools. Teacher, vice principal, principal, assistant superintendent, deputy superintendent, and now on February 1st, he was appointed as the interim superintendent for Newark's largest district, New Jersey's largest district, Newark Public Schools, under local control, a historical moment for our city. Yes, that deserves a round. Many people struggled for more than 20 years to make that happen. And so now with you, Mr. Robert Gregory, father of 3 and son of Newark, New Jersey.
Good morning. First and foremost, I want to thank everyone for coming together today to examine an issue we know is impacting far too many of our students and far too many schools here in Newark, but more importantly across the United States of America. It's a problem that has been in existence for quite some time, but it's one we often fail to see. Why? Because of the way our nation held us accountable. For decades, since the release of A Nation at Risk in the late 80s, we captured attendance in schools looking at average daily attendance percentages. And most schools got comfortable because they saw percentages like 90% or better. And in some cases, at some of our struggling schools, 80% or better. And we were socially conditioned as children in this country to think that 90% or better is an A, 80% is a B, so we're doing pretty good. But behind those numbers are human beings, our students, children whose individual needs are not being met in our schools or in some cases, our community. And while school leaders touted that they maintained a 90% or better average daily attendance, when you unpack that percentage, we see something we should all be alarmed by, and that is chronic absenteeism. You can have a 90% or better average daily attendance, but in that, 25% of your students can be chronically absent. So I want to thank President Obama for reawakening the nation and charging every state to capture individual data on students that track if they miss 10% of school or more. It may not seem like a lot, but 1 or 2 days a month adds up. And we are living through an age of information, a technological revolution that could potentially widen the gap between the haves and have-nots. And it is often those who suffer from societal ills, like intergenerational poverty, who fall into this category of chronically absent, which has a drastic impact not only on individual students, but on a class in a school building as a whole. Teachers have to determine ways to slow down or make up, and it often leads to missed opportunities for our students to learn more and to learn at sufficient rates comparable to their peers across the state and the nation that they will be competing for jobs for one day. So thanks to our former president, we now know we have left far too many children behind, contrary to what the law said. And we have to rethink education as a nation. We know more now than ever before about the way children learn, the science of pedagogy. And we must get out of our own way, pay attention to what we see, and marry it with the conditions and the research that solves the problem. We have to understand concepts like causal density. That is, we live in a grossly intertangled ecological system where multiple conditions creates a paradigm. So isolated and siloed approaches won't work. As a school system, we want to thank the Honorable Mayor Ras Baraka for his partnership and vision for moving North forward. We know he understands the city can't move forward without strong schools, and he has rallied us together as a community to launch a citywide campaign to destroy this problem. I want to personally thank the Youth Policy Board and our guest speakers and presenters like Dr. Robert Wood Johnson and others for your leadership. Our schools remain pathways towards a brighter future for our students, and we remain committed to moving from admiring problems to solving them. We have shifted the way we capture data as a school district and are now putting face to it, because if we get to know our students and who they are, we can apply a case management system to fulfill their vastly eclectic and diverse needs. But that won't work if we work in silos and we work alone. It takes a village, and the village is here to come up with solutions and execute them on behalf of our city's most precious resource, our students. We are no longer playing the blame game. We, as a district, acknowledge our shortcomings, and we have emerged as willing collaborators. We know we need your support, and coming out of our silos is our attempt to form a united front around quality education, ensuring our schools are more hospitable, that our teachers understand it's more than about knowing your content and teaching your content. It's about teaching and inspiring the brilliantly untapped minds of our students. It's not about English language arts and math alone. Sure, that is extremely important, but it's about a comprehensive education that exposes students to the arts, science, and history while engaging them in co-curricular activities with caring, supportive adults who believe in them and reward them not for being perfect. Nobody is perfect, but for making progress. Think about it. How many of you went to schools where the only kids that were recognized for attendance were those who had perfect attendance? If we rethink that a little bit and start recognizing students for improvement, then we start to shift mindsets. Kids are going to get sick. That's a part of life. Adverse childhood experiences are going to occur, and we have to be able to isolate those and look at them for what they are and not think it means that someone doesn't care. It means that somebody is struggling. It means somebody needs our approach, and everyone's needs are vastly different. So differentiation is of extreme importance. So, in closing, I want to just commend a couple of efforts that I've seen start impacting this thing called chronic absenteeism. One of them is in our South Ward community schools. We have programs like Success Mentors that match kids to supportive adults. We've created safe corridors to ensure that our students are getting to school safely. We have school-wide culture and climate initiatives that reframe how we speak to our kids and the unintentional messages we send in our grading practices, our curriculum, in the aesthetics of our building, and our disciplinary policies. But more importantly, in the South Ward community schools, we are partnering with the civic, business, higher ed, physical and mental health communities because we know it takes a village to ensure our kids are a part of the change occurring in Norton. So it is our goal to continue to codify and duplicate practices that work, and everyone in here plays an important role in our fight in the 21st century for equity and to do what our forefathers were unable to accomplish. Destroy the gap, create the bridge, and build pathways towards successful futures. As always, a better tomorrow starts with us today. Thank you.